Welcome back to Got No Control Podcast. I'm your host, RONEK, and today we're live and direct from San Diego, Barrio Logan area, and I have the pleasure of being here at the Tribal Warehouse, and I'm sitting here with the man behind the vision, Bobby. How you doing today, brother?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Man, it's a wonderful day. I'm excited for the opportunity. You know, I love San Diego. There's just so much culture out here. There's so much that I could really touch on when it comes to culture, and it's really amazing to be able to consume that and witness it firsthand on, you know?
Yeah.
Because in Los Angeles, we definitely have a lot of cultura as far as culture and diversity and different, many people from all over the place out there as well as out here. And I think it's amazing. And I think that's where I could see the resemblance between Los Angeles and San Diego.
Yeah.
You're a guy that has been part of the culture for so long, has contributed so much to the culture that I just wanted to dive into your story of Bobby, right? Bobby, where are you originally from and what is home to you?
I was actually born in San Antonio, Texas. And then before I turned 1 year old, we moved to Los Angeles. And I lived in LA. I lived in LA till I was like 7, 8 years old, something like that. And about 7 years old, and then we moved to San Diego, probably early 70s. And I've lived in San Diego ever since. So it's San Diego's home. You know, I'm from San Diego. I was just a little kid when I lived in LA, but I still had a lot of family in LA. So we would go back and forth quite a bit, and it's basically, I'm a product of Southern California. And then since we started the brand, I would spend a lot of time in LA, with my friends and doing business up there, and just, it's just Southern California. But I think going back to what you were saying, there's definitely, similarities to LA and San Diego, but I think there's different energy. They feel different. I think, there's definitely a difference as well. But I think, we all respect each other's, us from down here, we respect what's going on in LA and vice versa. A lot of my friends that are from up there, they love coming to San Diego, as well. So it's cool. Plus we got that Padres-Dodger thing going, that's always a good time.
And another thing I wanted to throw into the mix is the Mexican food, LA versus San Diego. I know I talked to Persuade about this in another interview. I mean, San Diego's up there with the Mexican food, man. I can't knock you guys down. The food is definitely there.
Yeah.
The taste is definitely there.
Well, we're right here on the border. We're next to Tijuana, but raza, and I think there's some great spots in LA as well. I've been to some amazing spots there too, but. Again, that's one of the similarities, I think. People always want to turn everything into a debate or an argument, but I think, this is Southern California. This is who we are, like LA, San Diego, we're all kind of, we're sharing a lot of the same culture, and it's not like, Mexicans didn't move up another hour, up to LA, 2 hours, whatever, but there's great food up there and down here, and it's, but just don't start talking about other parts of the country. That's when we start getting a little bit sensitive,
How did it feel losing the Chargers, man? Because I know
stop it.
I know they were San Diego for a while.
That was a big deal for me personally, being brought up a Charger fan since I was a little kid, and all through junior high school and high school, and I got my Charger bolt tattooed on me. And I'll be real honest with you, after the Chargers left, I have not sat down and watched one complete game of football. I can't do it, and also because they moved him to LA.
Ooh,
you know what I mean? It was like a kick in the balls.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only one that feels that way, but
it's like your girlfriend leaving you for your best friend.
Yeah, it is what it is, but it's just something that it really hurt the whole city, but it was just it was a fucked up situation, but
I can imagine.
There's other things that we do and get into, and it was one little piece to the big puzzle that we have down here.
Gotcha. I believe that your early beginnings are kind of what mold you to become the individual that you become today, and as you live life, right?
Yeah.
We carry those morals that we're taught by our parents as children. I want to dive into coming up as a child. how was that environment for you? Like, do you come from like a humongous sibling family where it's like 10 of you guys?
No.
Or is it very just like you and your mom type thing?
I think that's a great question, and I completely agree with you. You know, your surroundings are gonna create the person who you are. Your family, who you hang with, where you live, your environment, all that type of thing. So you can rebel against it, or you could go with it, or a little of both. I always tell people what built or what made me who I am, therefore making the brand what it is I have attention deficit disorder. And growing up in Southern California, there was, I loved, in the beginning it was, first and foremost, I was a little Mexican kid. I was Chicano, and I was taught to be proud of that. And, speaking both languages and the culture, and my brother and I both. I have one brother and one sister. But, since we lived in LA, we spent a lot of time in East LA where my family was too. But right after that, the earliest memories were obviously, riding bikes and skateboarding. I started skateboarding when we were still living in LA, so I must have been like 6, 7 years old. Wooden board and clay wheels, And then I did that all the way through college. I loved skateboarding, but I also loved, lowriders and doing graffiti and being on the streets and I graphic design, and it just kind of went from there. But the environment and who you surround yourself with, either intentionally or unintentionally by maybe a neighborhood that your family lives in or whatever it is. But that's basically, I'd spend time down at the beach. I would, listen to rock and roll and, oldies and funk, and later on punk rock, and hip hop didn't really come around. I really didn't start to take notice of hip hop till the early 80s, So I'm from the West Coast, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was a different vibe. But, I developed a love for hip hop and that culture, and pretty much immersed myself and the brand into it, not just, here in Southern California, but globally. Like we've become a real genuine movement that represents Southern California.
And I salute you guys for that, man. You guys have definitely made an impact. I want to take a small rewind. In my experiences coming up as a young, kid in the barrio, carnalismo is something that is definitely impactful. And by that I mean, like, many of us or some of us might not belong to a gang, but you're surrounded by them and they become family, and they take you under their wing.
Right.
Where it's kind of like, hey, that's a little homie over there, don't mess with him, because we got him, type thing, right?
Yeah.
We want to see him do good.
Right.
How did you balance that out? Because you mentioned going to college. So how do you balance yourself?
No, I messed around in all that stuff too, you know what I mean? Like, we had our little gang stuff, and, it wasn't like a big, crazy neighborhood, but we were definitely doing our share.
Yeah.
But again, it was a different time. It was a different era. And, back then you represented with, your style, who you hung around with, the way you dressed, and the writings on the wall that you'd put up, or who you'd kick it with or whatever. But I went from that whole scene to the car clubs. I was in a car club called Group, which is an OG car club, started in LA, and I was one of the first original members from San Diego chapter, and that was around 82. I joined Group Car Club, so that was, straight from that into, the little gang stuff, the gang stuff to, like I said, it wasn't anything real crazy or serious, but we were doing our thing. And then went into the car club, but from that, one thing during that whole time, like, I was one of those kids, like so many of us, there's so many people just like me, we skateboarded too.
Yeah.
We were listening to rock and roll, and we were listening to, different types of music, and, not just the funk, the soul, and the oldies. Like, there was all this different types of music that was always a big inspiration and kind of a soundtrack, to what we were doing. And gradually that soundtrack, it's always changing, even up to now, the music that you surround yourself with, and the people and all that kind of stuff. But definitely had some real good homies, and even better family.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from my parents, and My brother taught me a lot too. My brother taught me a lot what not to do by example. You know, but, and then again, you know, I have a bachelor's degree in Chicano studies from San Diego State, and with a minor in business management. I studied film, photography, graphic arts. And when I was in high school, I did a lot of graphic arts. And so that's, you know, early on, those studies enabled us to do those first tribal videos that we eventually became famous for, because that was kind of, you know, before social media and before you could see all this culture on television or in movies or on social media. You know, we were dropping it and taking it globally on VHS and later DVDs, you know, with everything that we represented and we were actively involved in. It wasn't, you know, like these brands that you see that are trying to capitalize on a culture that they really have no true connection to, or they don't participate in, you know. So I've always been a strong believer of supporting and immersing not just myself, but the brand within those cultures. If it was, you know, still lowriding and, you know, b-boys and graffiti and, you know, Chicanismo. And now, you know, like I'm a strong believer that one of the biggest art movements in the world right now is tattooing. And I've seen it firsthand. And a lot of these tattooers came from graffiti.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of graffiti writers that have become, you know, world famous tattooers, you know, and also great friends. And I see it, you know, dudes from Italy and from Germany and obviously from, you know, the States. But it's been fun, man. It's been a badass ride.
At what point do you go from absorbing the culture around you till now you want to start becoming creative in your own way?
That's another good question, man. Like there's you know, people have this misconception that, you know, being that I have been and you know, I'm no youngster anymore, obviously. But you know, there's a lot of other things that I enjoy doing. You know, I really enjoy traveling. I enjoy, ever since I was a little kid, like I said, I was born in South Texas and my family's from down there. So, you know, I go hunting, you know, at least once a year with family. We go spend time out on the ranch, and then my wife and I travel. You know, we'll get in I got a little Sprinter RV and we'll take off and do things like that. And my own creativity has always been, you know, tribal. I've always been the art director, and, you know, I do graphics, and I do, you know, I did a lot of the photography and videography early on. I still do, you know, a lot of that type of stuff. But, you know, my creativity, you know, it's kind of changing. And, you know, I've never, like I said in the beginning, I have, you know, I would again, ADD. I'm always looking for something to trip out on or to get into. So scenes change, and what you enjoy doing, I think, evolves, or it changes, or you don't spend as much time just doing for me, like the lowrider thing. Like there was a point where I had 8 lowriders at the same time, you know,
wow.
like trying to maintain these cars and show these cars, and it's hectic, you know, it's stressful. And maintaining any degree, or attempting to maintain any degree of perfection is hella stressful, and especially when you're trying to be, you know, competitive with it. So there's other things I do now that are more relaxing, less stressful, and I enjoy. And a lot of it is, you know, traveling and other parts of the world, or just being in nature, or, you know, going to northern New Mexico or to Utah, or, you know, other shit. And I encourage people to do that, to get out of your box, you know, and know that you're not confined to that box, and check other shit out, because there's a big ass world out there. And there's motherfuckers that are just stuck in their box because they think that's, you know, the coolest thing, which is, I guess that's cool too. But, you know, like I said, I would encourage them to, like, check out some other shit.
You'll find things of yourself that you didn't even know were within you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man.
I know I've done some traveling. I start discovering things that I was like, whoa, what's going on over here?
Yeah, and you'll find a lot of people, you know, you go to, especially here in the States, or you go to Europe, and you'll find people that love the same culture that we do. Like when we travel to these, you know, tattoo conventions, or, you know, whatever, we're just out there doing, you know, hanging out with homies, or a bunch of us will go on trips. You know, you kind of, gravitate towards people that are into a lot of the same shit. You know, you go out there, like even in the 90s when I first started going to Europe, you know, meeting the OGs from Germany and from France, and, you know, Mode 2 and Cantu and Dime and all, you know, Bates and all these cool, really, really cool graffiti writers from out there. And same thing, you know, going to Japan and the B-boys from out there, and, you know, the lowriders from out there. And it's just, but you're in another country. So it's, you know, it's a trip, man. It's a trip. It's a blessing, you know,
Definitely
more
is.
than anything. It's a blessing. And, you know, that's, I keep that, I try to keep that into perspective too. Like, you know, I know that. And then another thing, like it's not tribal, and this whole onda or this whole movement or brand isn't me, isn't just me. You know, I'm that guy that kind of curates it or puts it together, or the art director, the CEO, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Mm-hmm. But it only, like when we say worldwide click, that shit's real. Like we've got good homies that open up their homes and doors all over the world, and when they come out here, we do the same thing, and then they relate to each other. You know, so it's a real beautiful thing to be able to go to, you know, so many other parts of the world, or not just me. You know, it could be, you know, the homie Demise or you know, Joey or whoever, and they know when they travel they got family or they got people that'll take care of them here or there. But it's fun, you know, and you know, we learned that really early on, that, you know, about traveling and reciprocating when you travel, and, you know, you take care of people and they take care of you, and then, you know, there's bonds that are created, you know, from this travel.
And I always say that I'd rather have a strong relationship over anything, because when you have those type of relationships where you could just pick up the phone, mm-hmm. Hey, I just got to England,
right.
Can you give me a hand? Yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
that's worth more than anything else. It's good
shit, man. It really, really is. And you know, it's really good. And when you travel, like, you know, going back to the mid 90s when we first started doing these tribal tours to Japan, and going out there with, you know, Cartoon and Esteban and the Cycle Realm, and, you know, the Beat Nuts and Rocksteady crew and Style Elements, and, you know, tattooers. And there's friendships that are forged, that were forged during these tours, that remain today. And I don't just mean my friendship with them, I mean their friendships with each other. You know what I mean? Like, and it just grows, it grows. So it's really, really cool to see that, those connections, or when I see, you know, the homies working together, and I know that we were part of putting that together. You know what I'm saying? Like, where people are able to grow and work together, and you know, whatever it is, it's cool to see that.
You know, a lot of people just seem to see the success, but they don't understand the groundwork, the sleepless nights, the errors,
the falling on your face, the stressful nights, the, you know, the feeding the kids and paying the bills. And, well, you know, with that being said, there's one thing that, you know, I feel really strongly about, and you know, I've said this multiple times. I believe Streetwear was born here in San Diego at the 432F shows, and anybody that was at those shows, I'm not just talking about the brands from Southern California. You know, I'm talking about, you know, 555 Soul, or you know, Mark Echo, or, you know, Stash and Futura, and you know, from here, you know, people like Risky and Con Art and my homie Dies, and there's a lot of brands that you know, that was the first time we all came together under one roof collectively, and you know, established this streetwear movement. From those times, you know, obviously before us there was a brand called Stussy, which I've always had a lot of respect for, and I still do. But you know, during that time period, you know, there's maybe a handful of brands that are left, that are genuinely still connected to, you know, these cultures, and you know, representing globally, and that's where I think I take a lot of pride, is that, you know, like, we're still here, motherfucker. Like, we're still doing this, and it's not just, you know, it's you know, sometimes people, and I've felt this before, like I've said before, like sometimes they look at us, we're too street for streetwear. Streetwear has gotten polished and flossy and fashion, and, you know, maybe not so Chicano, not so street, not so lowrider, not so graffiti,
More
not so like,
commercial.
yeah, not so, you know, gang letters or whatever it is that we're putting out there, homies that are tatted. Like, we're streetwear. We were one of the forefathers of streetwear, and we're still here representing. So, you know, it's sometimes we don't even get recognized. You know, people will just, you know, like you see all these streetwear experts talking about this and that, or, you know, this brand from here and this guy because he designed something for whoever, you know, that these guys are the, you know, kings of whatever, they're the streetwears. Well, do your homework, man. Do your homework, you know, don't just talk to me, go talk to, you know, people in New York, and, you know, talk to Risky, you know, talk to Sucker Mike, you know, talk to, you know, the people from, you know, 555 Soul in New York, and talk to Futura and Stash, and talk to, you know, the homies that were there, and the ones that are still standing that can tell you the story. Hayes, you know, Eric Hayes is a legend. That's my boy. Like, and he's still doing his thing, you know. So there's that camaraderie that we built building streetwear and establishing these roots for streetwear. Like, we all did it together. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's not taking all the credit by any means, but, you know, it was all of us. It was, you know, making this movement what it is, you know.
Do you ever sit back and think about, one day I'm not gonna be here and I'm gonna have to leave this behind?
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel?
You met my son Isaac?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's, you know, it's I don't know. You know, I've got my family, I got the crew, I got the homies, I got, like, you come in here on a Friday afternoon when this thing's cracking, like, there's you know, it's never gonna go anywhere because I've been such a hoarder of, I've been collecting art for the past 35 years or so. We've gotten, you know, books written and documented, and, you know, shit that I've done and collected, and, you know, I keep a real solid archive. So when people start digging, they'll find us. I don't think we're gonna go anywhere. Once, you know, history is told, and I think, you know, there's so many fucking stories, Holmes. Like, there's so many, you know, there was so much love and connection, and we're still doing stuff, you know. Like, I had kind of a dream collab last year working with Pendleton, which was like the first time they really, you know, worked with a Chicano-owned brand. And then working with my friends still, you know, still working with Cartoon, and still working with Shepard Ferry, and still working with OG Abel and Esteban and Dies One and Mike Giant, and all these relationships. You know, we'll always stand, and this might sound corny or whatever, but we're always gonna stand as like, this was us, you know, this was our crew, this was how we represented, you know, not just the West Coast, but, you know, to the whole globally, you know.
Yeah.
like people recognized what we were doing, and I think early on it was because of the videos and the DVDs and shit like that we were putting out, and that's the only place people could really see these things unless they were coming out here and going to trade shows or hanging out with the homies in the neighborhoods and stuff.
How did the idea come to you, though? Like, how did the idea of starting a streetwear brand begin for you?
When I was in high school, I studied graphic design and, like I said, photography. And later on, I got into television production and film like that and stuff when I was in... I didn't go to college right away out of high school. I was a janitor. I worked as a custodian for like 4 or 5 years, maybe more. It helped me get through college. And that's part of what you were saying. Motherfuckers think that this shit just happens. Like, try cleaning toilets in an elementary school or a girls' high school bathroom, and just trying to get your degree, and you know, getting burned by people, and you know, not just getting burned, I mean in business, like not really knowing what I was doing or what we were doing in the beginning. So to be real honest, my brother and I, we always we had a hustle where we knew how to work the swap meets, and my parents taught us business, and we acquired a bunch of t-shirts and hoodies that were hot. And you know, we just used to sell. They had like this funky wash on them, or like textures and washes, and we would just sell them like that. And then I told my brother, I was like, hey, why don't we, because he was designing Tattoo Flash at that time, why don't we put it on, start putting some of your tattoos on some of these shirts, So we started printing up some of these shirts, and this was in '89. We started printing up some of these Tattoo Flash and putting them on shirts, and it was definitely unique. And back then it was tribal, it was Azteca, it was Mayan, it was, it was cultura. And then we started doing lowriders and stuff. And it was during that time I was going to school at San Diego State, and I was working as a janitor still. And then as a senior, they asked me to curate a show at the Centro Cultural in Balboa Park. So it was around that time I started connecting with a lot of local graffiti writers. And to me, the graffiti thing then, it was so different because it was like late 80s. It was colorful. It was different, these lines, like, fuck, how are they getting these lines? Look at all this color. We were like one color, two colors, block letters. It wasn't as intricate or colorful, or the style was different, and it kind of drew me in. And I started meeting cats like, Bust One and Zodak and Severe and Zard and, Saki and Quasar and all the homies from down here, they're graffiti heads, and Mike Giant around that same time. And then we just started putting it on the same thing, putting that shit on some of the t-shirts. And we had done a food drive down here in '91, I think. And the food drive was basically, I curated a big building, like graffiti in the building. To get into to see the show, you had to bring in a bag of canned foods. Well, Power and Skate came down. It was Power and Skate. They were one of the first ones there in the morning from LA before we even opened. I started talking to them, and I didn't know them. I had just met them that day. I let them in, and they did a feature in Can Control magazine.
Okay.
And I had done this shirt that looked like a Krylon can, which everybody was fucking with back then. We did it, Third Rail did it, Carnart did it. It was just kind of like everybody was biting logos, you know. And there was a picture of a bunch of us that was featured in Can Control, and then Power calls me and he's like, man, dude, like, I'm getting all these letters, because remember, there was no email, there was no social media. It was just basically phone calls and letters and snail mail and all that kind of stuff. So he goes, hey, yeah, people are hitting me up like about those shirts. And I go, yeah. And he goes, you probably want to, figure out a way to start selling them. So we started selling them into Hollywood, and we started doing these little mail order. We ran some ads, I think, in Can Control and Thrasher magazine, and started getting the word out. And then in '92, we did our first trade show here in San Diego. And that's pretty much where it fucking took off. And that's where I met my boy Risky. And him and I always tell people, like, we learned this shit together. Like, him and I, we walked the streets in LA, the Garment District, and neither one of us really knew what the fuck we were doing. Yeah. But we made it work, and we had a blast, and we would travel. He had Third Rail, right? Yeah, he had Third Rail. And he's... we became, that's a whole other story, that relationship and the way we met and all that, but shout out to him.
Shout out to Risky. He's the first person I ever interviewed and sat down with.
Yeah, and then through him, I met, Cartoon, and I think I might have met OG Abel through him, and Esteban, but again, we were at trade shows, whatever the fuck we were doing, we were supporting each other. There was not really even an inch of competitiveness. Like, somebody would come to the trade show and they'd look at, they want to buy some tribal stuff, and they go, who else should we go talk to? Oh, go talk to the homies over here at Joker, or go talk to Third Rail, or go talk to 25 or Sucker Mike, or we were all pushing for each other. Because if we're gonna be in a store and they need other brands in that store, it might as well be the homies. It's a good look, and it's a win-win, And
this was the beginning of Streetwear.
That was the beginning of Streetwear. But that mentality, that camaraderie, those friendships ran all the way into the 2000s. You know what I mean? Like, to this day, like, we'll call each other, we keep in touch. Like, pretty much, if they call me, I pick up. I could call them, they pick up. Like, there's still that our kids grew up together. Like it's like Isaac's. Let's see, OG Abel's son was in Isaac, my son Isaac's wedding. So, we all our kids. Like
Know
it's
each
it's
other.
yeah, Lefty Cartoon Son has worked on projects with my son. Like the kids are working together, and there's definitely another generation that either you've noticed it, people have noticed it, or they will, because it's coming. You're not going out that easy.
Cartoon was a big impact on my side of town because he's one of the guys that really established himself out the harbor area.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. He's as solid as they come. That's the homie. And like I said, it's a trip for me, like on a personal level, to see how, and not just a trip, like I get happy, bro. I genuinely, it gets me like pumped up to see how good, he's doing. Like, because not just him, Abel and Risky and Esteban, and then going into the music industry, like I did a lot in new metal. I worked with, Linkin Park and Korn and fucking Limp Bizkit and POD and just all these new metal bands. But I met those dudes, same shit, before they were blown up. They were kids trying to build their band, build their name, and we became friends like before their first album or when they were dropping their first album. And those relationships as well, like those relationships are still intact, and it makes me happy to see, like, fuck, look at these motherfuckers now. Like, I was out with Limp Bizkit last year, and I'm still great friends with all those dudes and some of the guys from Korn and POD, and it's a trip to see again who they became. You never know. And that's one thing, I try to teach, my crew and the kids around me, is just be cool with everybody, because you never know, one of these motherfuckers is gonna blow. And if that's your homie, you got to support them, and they'll support you, and keep that network intact, because you can help them and they can help you, and just, it's not going to hurt you to be cool.
I know you mentioned early on you and your brother were putting his Chicano art on t-shirts, right?
Yeah.
I know in Los Angeles.
And lowriders and stuff.
In Los Angeles, early on, before graffiti, there was impactful Chicano murals, right? Mm-hmm. And I know in San Diego, there's a lot of Chicano arte out here that's very impactful. Is there an artist or two that you can name early on that was very impactful in the Chicano muralism out here?
In the well, there's a Mexican artist that we really were attracted to early on, named Jose Guadalupe Posada.
Okay.
Out here, there was Mario Torero. That was really good. A guy named Victor Ochoa. Another dude named Queso. These were most of the dudes that muraled here in Chicano Park. And then, there was Jesus Helguera, which is another great Mexican artist. And we were digging into, my brother and I still have a lot of these books, is, the Mesoamerican motifs and graphics and design and stuff like that. So, I would draw inspiration from everywhere. I was like, and then, going back a little bit too, like even before tribal, I would rock Santa Cruz, like that, because I skated, in a lowrider rocking Santa Cruz, but that was me. I had my skateboard, in the car, or Dogtown, and shout out to Jim Muir, who's a great friend too, I loved Pau Peralta and all these badass skate brands that existed prior to us, because, at the same time, what else were we gonna wear? Like, what else was there for us to wear besides our standard uniform? Our Pendletons and white T-shirts and Dickies and what we wore. But when we wanted to be maybe a little different or sporty or evolve, and go to punk rock shows or art shows or car shows or whatever, there was definitely some change, and not to say a lot of the homies didn't maintain their traditionalism and that style, which is cool. I respect that, but I was always trying to do something different,
Not to mention that San Diego is home to some of the biggest skate brands.
Yeah, there was a lot going down here, and I think it's cool that you recognize that, and a lot of people do. You know, it's cool down here, man. You know, just don't tell nobody.
Keep it to yourself.
you know, but no, but all my friends and you know, homies, they know this is home for them when they come to San Diego. This is their home base, and they come through and they're always welcome here, and they know that. You know,
I love it out here, man.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
it's super dope out here.
Yeah,
Even like catching I like to catch the train down here.
Yeah.
And you go through Oceanside, and you go through all the ocean, and you get to just chill. I love it, man.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice.
Is Tribal the initial name that you started with, or was there a name before that?
No, that was it. So what happened was, you know, it started selling and moving, and my brother actually came up with the name. My brother Joey, is we were just, fuck, we got to come up with a name. Like, you know, this stuff's selling. And, you know, I have a lot of the early, you know, graphics and screens, and I was always documenting shit, like even the old graffiti from San Diego. I got so much shit. But, you know, what are we gonna call it? When we threw some names around, and my brother, he just spit it out. He goes, why don't we call it Tribal? You know, I don't know what the mix was or how said it, and it stuck.
He's like, hey, Bobby,
yeah,
I got it. What is it?
Yeah.
Tribal.
yeah, maybe. And then, you know, I did all the letters early on. I would do all the letters that said Tribal, and you know, I knew more about silk screening and graphic design and stuff than my brother did. And but my brother, you know, I don't take anything away from his creativity, because, you know, that's what helped launch the brand. You know, is his tattoo flash and his ideas for tattoos. And then, you know, there were no real, you know, there was Lowrider magazine that, you know, they were doing some stuff that was kind of lowrider. There was Lowrider, you know, duh. But, you know, we started putting lowriders on shirts, like started putting, you know, Chicano style, you know, letters on shirts. We started putting things that people like ourselves could relate to. And not just that, you know, later on, you know, it evolved into, you know, characters and calaveras and, you know, all the fun shit. And
Stuff
you know,
that could be rocked with pride.
yeah,
like
you
this
know,
belongs to me.
something different. And then again, you know, when people ask me, well, how did you get, you know, these bands to wear your stuff? Well, my response to that was, what else were they gonna wear? You know, like there were some cool brands, but, you know, and not to take anything away from the homies, but, you know, they would rock Third Rail shit too, and they would rock the Joker stuff, and, you know, but as far as the Tribal stuff, you know, the bands really became, you know, attached to it. You know, all these bands, and you know, Soul Assassins, that's family too, and, you know, the Cypress Hill homies, and, you know, in New York, the Rocksteady crew and Tony Touch, and it's there's a lot, bro.
There's something that I wanted to dive in with you, brother, because I personally believe that you could really resign with this question. You know, being a business owner, you know, what I like to say, the head at the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't always keep everybody happy. It's just not possible, right? So how do you balance like those situations of like not being able to keep everybody happy?
Fuck, bro, you know, I'm gonna be real honest with you. Like, I've been so blessed that the negativity and the lost relationships are extremely minimal. At the very least, I'm cordial with everybody. At the very, very least, you know.
Yeah.
And again, that's something that I teach, you know, my sons and my kids and the homies here in the building. Like, it's not gonna hurt you just to be cool. Like, just say what's up, you know. Because down the road, like, you're gonna grow, you're gonna change, they're gonna grow, change. The little fucking spat that happened right here, it ain't gonna mean shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and then, you know, you never know. So I've lived with that mentality, and you know, I try to keep it like that. But happy in regards to design, you mean? Happy in regards to our product, or happy in regards to relationships?
That's a relationship, I guess I could say.
Yeah, no, you know, there's always gonna be haters, but I know how to deal with that. And they're not, most of the haters aren't gonna hate on my face, because I'm that guy. If you want to talk about it, you want to argue about it, you want to like debate about it, like let's go. Let's go.
Yeah.
Like I know who we are. I know our history, and I know who has love for us, and we got love for, and and I like shout out to the homies from the Seventh Letter. That's family too. Casey, I've known Casey since he was a youngster, and
I almost went to EDC just to see what they do.
I love those dudes, and the dudes from there, and just man, it's like we're proud of this shit. We're proud of it, and sometimes we're not out there waving our flag hard enough, but I'm hoping eventually people, with it's gonna come to surface, and we're still doing fine, and we're right here, and like I said, we're one of the maybe a handful of survivors from the original streetwear days. That's still original owners. Still genuinely connected to the cultures and lifestyle that we represent, and have the network intact. You know what I mean?
Definitely, man. That's definitely something amazing for me to witness, because I wasn't here at that time,
Yeah.
and to be able to walk in here and see the art collection and just see everything here.
It's just what fits on the walls, dude. It's like I have so much stuff, put away or in storage or in the flat files or at the pad or on the floors. Like it's pretty much, every week there's really cool additions that are added, and what's exciting to me is watching, the progression of, the artists and how much they've inspired each other and push each other to grow. You know what I mean? And then to meet, new artists. Like traveling is, like I can't say enough about these Italian kids that are doing, black and gray style pencil tattoos, and that drew a lot of inspiration from out here. But even graffiti writers that are still killing it, from that I still have relationships with.
Who's been surprising me? Mexico.
Come on, man.
Doing over there.
That's
man.
Yeah. There's some we work with Buster from Mexico, and we've worked with Peque and Humo and Elvia, and Keeps is a beast, and Keeps is a Mexicano that lives in the Czech Republic. So he's a Chicano, but Mexicano. That I don't know the legal things, but he moved to the Czech Republic, and he's very active in Europe, and then he'll come to Mexico.
Oh wow!
And they'll come to TJ, bro. Like if you could get to TJ and Mex, and then people that have roots in Mexico. Sleeps is the homie too. That's family as well. Big Sleeps, and we're praying for him. But yeah, man, Mexico. It's a trip, bro. Like it's a trip to see it, and
I trip out because they don't have the luxury paint down there. They're working where just like
they get some stuff too. Peque moved to Australia.
Oh, so he's getting some stuff.
Yeah, I don't. And then there's I don't know if you've heard of Humo. Humo's a beast, and these are like some of the OG guys, and yeah, there's some real sick stuff. And we're working with Tribal. We're working with more and more Mexican graphic designers as well. There's dudes coming from Mexico. So, and then there's this year is exciting with some projects that we've got going with a guy named Steve Leoni.
Mm-hmm.
He's from Venice, and then Kindamo from Italy. And then Motive, who's a lettering beast. He's originally from down here. He goes back and forth from LA to here, and then just everything else. We just keep moving.
I had an opportunity to go through some old magazines like Big Time and another one called RONEK.
Oh shit, yeah.
And I see some of the early Tribe ads on there.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa.
That back then it's like that's what we had. You had flyers, you had word of mouth, you had, Herb magazine and Rhyme magazine and Big Time magazine, and wherever you could get the word out, you'd get the word out. But yeah, man, that was this kind of fucked a lot of things up. It helped a lot of things, and but I think I'm hoping, and I see a little bit of it, like people trying to to go backwards a little bit. You know, people selling records or people selling, you know, videos or you know, turning their phones off more and paying attention. You know, I think with this whole AI thing, it's definitely changed the look of my feed, of everybody's feed, and
a lot of people seem to be implying they, for me, in my opinion, a lot of flyers are being AI
I'm
generated.
seeing a shit ton of them. And what's, you know, for people that are doing like art-driven conventions or graffiti shows or tattoo conventions, to be doing AI, you know, like you shouldn't be doing that, man. Like, it's going to be interesting to see where we're at in, you know, 1, 5, 10 years. But I've always said, like, I know the technology that I've seen in my lifetime, which is, you know, a lot. Like the change in technology, you know, from little black and white TVs that you no remote controls and no microwaves, and, you know, photography and photos and the cameras and the video, everything, just the technology. And then it started moving faster and faster and faster, and then eventually we're here, right? Imagine what this next generation's gonna see with the technology, the AI technology, and then just how fast technology is moving now. Like,
might get to a point where you're not gonna even need a human anymore.
that, you know, and there's already signs of that type of thing. You know, it's, you don't need someone driving your car. You don't need a human to do so many other things. So what the fuck are we gonna do? You know, what's a human gonna do? You know, like,
that thing kind of blows my mind too, because like how technology has grown. Because I had an episode a couple weeks ago, right, where my guest speaks about how to get a mix to B-boy, you would have to sit by the radio, record it, put it on a piece of paper, and then pause, play, commercial, and get it on the dot, and then get it out, put it on your box, and then go bump and do what you gotta do. And I'm sitting there like, whoa.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean?
You had to put the work in. You had to hit the streets. You had to be there. You had to be at the events. You had to be at the jams. You had to be on the street. You had to cruise your car. You had to go to the park. You had to do all these things, you know, at the trade, whatever the fuck. You had to be there. You had to physically do it. Now you could go like, oh, that looks cool. Wow. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's the difference, is the ability for people to actually be able to interact and have social skills and be able to express themselves, and not just visually, but, you know, with words and language. All that's changing. It's changed. It's already changed, and it's going to continue to change, you know? Definitely.
I just trip out sometimes. I'm just like, whoa. You know, one thing that I really love about Tribal, one of many things, is how involved you guys were in the b-boy culture early on. And you have some of the biggest names here.
Yeah, we still have those. We're actually working on an event right now. I don't know if I'm supposed to say it yet, but we're working on a really big event with a really big company. And with a lot of them same homies that you know, we have been real close to the brand. They're still, you know, those are still great friends. You know, the Style Elements homies are California, and, you know, Rocksteady, and Massive Monkeys, and all these b-boy crews that we've, you know, worked with. It was fresh, it was new, it was exciting, it was bubbling, it was you know, it was new, it was that fresh shit. It was you know, people were tripping on it. I remember the first couple times I seen b-boys in person was when I was a janitor at the high school I was working at. They wanted to get into the gym, and I'm like, whoa, like, what the fuck? You know, because you have to remember, like, where the fuck else are you gonna see this? Where are you gonna see it? You're not gonna see it on TV. You might see it on a movie. You might be able to catch it on a video real quick. You're not gonna see it, you know, everywhere yet, or on, so you see it in person, and it's kind of like a culture shock, you know? It's like, it was a trip, man. And then, you know, all these, you know, I shout out to Easy Rock, you know. He was one of the first b-boys that started touring with us, and a student named Floor Rock. And then, you know,
Vegas?
From Vegas. Like, he would go to Japan with us, and then, you know, Crumbs. And it's a trip because, you know, when I say these names, I know, like, that they became great friends with the skateboarders that were on on the tour, or like they would run into somebody else from the tour in LA, and again those friendships came out of that, those tours. But
and you guys, if I'm not mistaken, you guys produced like a tracksuit for Crazy Legs.
we did a Crazy Leg suit. We used to do a lot of custom stuff. Yeah, shout out to Legs, man. Like that was, it's a trip, man. It's a trip, and it's got fucking so many roots and tentacles, and we go in so many fucking directions that are just hella cool. We can sit here and talk about rappers and rap groups and hip hop, or we can talk about music and rock and roll and new metal and punk rock, and we can talk about graffiti, and we can talk about tattooing, and we can talk about low riding, and all these things that are genuine part of who we are, and who we've become. And obviously things change and they evolve, like I said earlier, but it is what it is.
And before we get on out of here, brother, I got a last question for you. Is there anyone that inspired you that you could share early on? Someone that kind of motivated you or pushed you?
My jefe, my dad, my mom, they believed in me the whole time, like that, besides, and they taught us work ethic and hard work, and we're Mexicans, homie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Get up in the morning, we'd go to the swap meets, we'd cut the grass, I'd had to go to school, I couldn't bring home shitty grades, like that was tough love, inspiration, In regards to tribal, no. Because there was nobody. I like I said, I like Stussy, but I didn't want to be like Stussy. I wanted Stussy to be like Stussy. I wanted tribal to do something fresh and new and innovative, and I believe we did that. And in the clothing industry, and again, I'm gonna give it to the homies. Like we inspired each other, we pushed each other, and the artists and trying harder to do something better and sicker and doper, and we were inspiring each other, like to try to drop the next shit, or going to a trade show and being like, I got something for you, motherfucker, but in a the
You
customers,
think you got it. Hey, go get that box.
go look at that, you know what I mean? But it's the same way. It's hip hop, it's street, it's punk rock, it's rock and roll. There's pride, there's a degree of friendly competitiveness, but it's always been friendly, and it's never been anything negative, at least not on my part. I never looked at it that way, because either way I'm good, dog. Like I don't need that negativity. I don't need that to compete with you to fucking do my thing, or do our thing, because I know where we've been, I know where we're at, and I know where we're going, and what we're working on, and I'm proud of that.
100%. You mean a lot to San Diego, bro. One thing, one advice you could give to that kid that will watch this that's inspired by you here in San Diego?
Don't do drugs. That's rule number one. I'm not gonna tell you not to party and have a good time, because sometimes that's where some of the best ideas come from, but don't do any hard drugs or do any stupid shit. Try to keep it clean, be cool with everybody. Like I said earlier, it doesn't cost you anything just to be cordial, be nice, be cool, and learn to shake some shit off, because it's gonna bother you more than it bothers the other person usually, and ends up fucking yourself up. Study, learn. I always tell people that you're gonna get an education regardless, and you're gonna pay for it. You're gonna pay for it if you go to university, go to college. You're gonna pay for it. You're gonna pay that tuition. You're gonna pay gas, housing. You're gonna pay all that shit. You don't go to college, you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna make mistakes either way. Those mistakes are gonna cost you, money, a lot of money, doing dumb shit. They can cost you family members, they can cost you friendships, they can cost you whatever it is, but educate yourself as much as you possibly can. Read the 4 Agreements. That's a great book. I would say read that. And know the history, because what I'm seeing is a lot of people now is like, they really don't give a shit about the history. Find out, like, for me, a brilliant mind is like DJ Muggs. like Soul Assassins, like that's the homie, and that dude is brilliant. Like you listen to the way he speaks, his philosophies and work ethic, and you know, develop a work ethic and get your ass up in the morning and do what you got to do, and don't wait for someone to tell you what to do. Like, get your shit done, man. Like, grind and hustle, and you know, there's kids up in here right now that are, you know, early 20s that are making money that I could only have dreamed of at that age. Tattooing, you know, learn a skill, and
Stay hungry.
you know, yeah, stay hungry and learn from each other, inspire each other, and build a network. You know, build a network, a solid network of people, and you know, where you can help them and they can help you, because you know, the reality is some people still don't want us to succeed, or they don't want to see us winning, and I can tell you that firsthand, because you know, we are, like I said earlier, sometimes, you know, I feel like we're too street for streetwear, we're too Chicano, we're too lowrider, our look is a little too hard, or whatever it is, too real, and they'll exclude you, and they'll try to, you know, step on you to get where they're going. But at the end of the day, you know, we'll prevail, and the truth will be told, and shit will come to surface, you know, because a lot of these motherfuckers are long gone.
Yeah.
You know, people that I seen that you know, attempted to do some of these things, and just kept my mouth shut, but you know, we're still here, they're gone, you know. So it happens. But I think, you know, in regards to your question, just, you know, build a network, be cool, read, educate yourself, and you know some of your history, not just your cultural history, or, you know, American history, Chicano history, whatever it is, but the history of things that you excel in. If it's tattooing, if it's graffiti, if it's clothing, whatever it is, like, know the history and learn from their mistakes, and learn from, you know, because to me it sucks when somebody says they're gonna do something and they don't know who their, you know, their G's are, their OGs or forefathers, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. Like, know your history.
100%. Thank you, brother, for
You're
giving
welcome.
me a tour of
We
the
did it,
of the
finally.
spot, and being here and giving me an opportunity. To anybody out there watching this, if you guys want to see a full-on length podcast episode, give me 5,000 comments, and I'll work the hardest and the best I can to make that happen. Drop a comment below. Let us know what you think. It's nothing but love and respect. And don't forget, visit Tribal Gear.
That's right. Tribal Streetwear is our IG. I'm Bobby Tribal, and yeah, tribalstreetwear.com, all that shit. Bobby Tribal YouTube. There's a lot more we could have talked about, but a lot more coming.
A lot more coming.
That's right.
Until next time, guys. Peace.